All right, so thank you guys for coming to our last student success seminar. And today we're going to talk about common misconceptions among engineering students. And before I jump right in, does anyone, if you had to guess what might be a misconception, would anyone want to volunteer a guess on something that came to mind?
Common misconceptions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, always not double checking your work.
Okay, that's a good one. We're gonna touch on that. Yep, that's one. Anybody else? Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and jump right in. Here's some of the misconceptions that I came up with, and this is based on both my time as a student as well as my time as an instructor and watching how students complete the material and how successful they are. So here are some of the misconceptions. So misconception number one: I tried hard, so I should get a good grade. And on the right are some pictures. The first one is an incomplete bridge. The second one is the eyesore on I-4. I'm assuming most of you are from the Orlando area and are familiar with the eyesore on I-4. And then the last one is the picture of the Boeing 737, which has had a lot of problems in the past few years because of crashes. So I put all of these pictures on here because as engineers, it's important to try. We have to try hard, but if we don't get the right answer, it matters. It matters. Engineers, they have to pour an immense amount of effort into their work, and at the end of the day, the results that they get have to be viable and dependable. So engineers, ultimately, we design and implement products for our society. And if you have an engineering failure, it can cost money, time, or in its most extreme case, human life. So as an engineer, it's good to try. We have to try and we have to keep trying. We can't quit till we get to the answer. But it's not enough to say, well, I tried hard, so I should get at least a B on this. If the answers aren't right, then we have to keep pushing. We have to keep going until we get to the correct answer. Because at the end of the day, these three images on the side of the screen here are examples of, well, I tried, but it wasn't right. And at the end of the day, we can't use a bridge that doesn't connect on both ends. The eyesore on I-4 has been a complete waste of time and money. And then the Boeing 737 has killed people due to issues with its planes. So we have to get the right answers because there are things that depend on it at the end of the day. So the misconception is I tried hard, so I should get a good grade. Now you got to try hard, and you also have got to eventually figure out what the right answers are. Now, if you tried hard on the homework and you didn't do good on the homework, that's fine. You have to try again and make sure that you eventually figure out those correct answers. So as engineers, we must try, but more importantly, we must keep trying until our work is correct. And we've already talked about the whole do not quit attitude. Another thing that I like students to know is sometimes students feel like a grade is a personal attack or reflection on their character or anything like that. Grades just reflect how close you were to the right answer. It's not a personal attack on your lifestyle, how much time you studied, how hard you tried. It's only a measure of here was the right answer and here's how close you were. So grades reflect correctness, not how much effort you put in. If your effort isn't producing the grades you want, then you might have to figure out what you need to change about your academic habits, your study habits, how you go about getting help, things like that, in order to earn a better result. But at the end of the day, we can't expect a good grade just for trying. Engineering is not like a kids' soccer team where everyone gets a medal just for showing up. You actually do have to keep going until you get to the correct solution. So trying hard is not enough to get a good grade. And then another thing about trying hard, it looks different for everyone. This term isn't a quantifiable way to measure success. Student A could have tried hard by trying for 10 minutes, and student B could have tried hard by trying for 2 hours, and they both could have gotten the wrong answer. Well, the grades are going to reflect that. So just the idea that, well, I tried hard, so I should get a good grade. I can't measure how hard you tried. All I can measure is the answer you turned in and how close it was to the correct answer. So at the end of the day, as an engineering student, you have to be thinking about what results you can produce, not just the effort that you can put in. So, misconception number one, I tried hard, so I should get a good grade. You got to keep going until you get the correct answers. Misconception number two, I can't learn this, it's too hard. It's not a secret that engineering is one of the more challenging disciplines that you can pick to study while you're in school, but that doesn't mean that it's too hard. I picked this quote from a article. The quote says, "The secret to winning is learning how to lose. That is, learning to bounce back from failure and disappointment undeterred and continuing to steadily march toward your potential. Your response to failure determines your capacity for success. So when it does get hard, how you respond to it is ultimately going to determine how far you go." And we've already again talked about the idea of the do not quit attitude and being having self-confidence, telling yourself positive things. So don't tell yourself that you can't learn it. Don't tell yourself that it's too hard. Figure out how you're going to overcome it. This quote comes from a man named James Clear. He wrote a book called Atomic Habits. If you are a person who feels like you procrastinate too much, or you have some habits that you don't think are quite healthy and you want to change them, but you don't know how, he's got a really great book on changing your habits in order to be more successful in whatever you're working on. He also does a weekly newsletter. I get this newsletter every week in my email. It's called the 321. It stands for 3 short ideas, 2 quotes, and 1 question to ponder. Just really great wisdom, great quotes. So if you're interested in anything like that, or getting like an uplifting email once a week, you can go to his website, jamesclear.com, and sign up for the weekly newsletter. Highly recommend it. And that newsletter is where I got this quote, which I thought was super applicable for what we're talking about today. So you can check that out if you'd like. The next misconception, I don't have time to study. I have a lot of students who have withdrawn from class, and their reasoning is, I just don't have time to study. And I started researching this, and I found an article that I really liked how it broke this down. And the link to the article is at the bottom of the screen. But when we say we don't have time, most of the time, what we really mean is, I haven't made the time. I don't know how to make the time. I don't want to make the time. I don't have time to do that and keep all my other commitments, or I'm not willing to sacrifice any of my current priorities in order to make room for this one. So if you're that person who feels like, I don't have time to study, I don't have time to do the homework, I don't have time to get ready for a quiz or an exam, my challenge to you is to figure out where the I don't have time is coming from. And I'm guessing that for some of you, one of these will apply. So let's sort of break this down, the idea of not having time. How you spend your time is proof of your priorities. So if you feel like you don't have time to study, take an account of your 24-hour day. In 24 hours, what did you do and what was the most important? For example, in a typical day, how much time did you spend watching TV, YouTube, social media? How much time did you spend studying? How much time did you spend working? How much time did you spend sleeping? How much time did you spend taking care of family members or pets? How much time did you spend on self-care? How much time did you spend on chores? These are just examples of how we spend our time. But if you're feeling like you don't have room for school in your life, the first thing that I suggest you do is take an inventory of your time and figure out, what are you currently spending your time on? That's question number 1. And then question number 2 is, are there things that you could remove or reduce in your schedule? Are there ways you could be more efficient with the time that you spend? Maybe you could find a way to get a workout in 30 minutes instead of an hour, and then you got 30 minutes to study, as an example. But in order to solve the I don't have time problem, you got to first look at where your time is currently going, and then decide what you can do to change about your schedule to make room for school. Now, what if school just doesn't fit into my schedule? This is not a personal attack on your schedule. If you don't have time for school, then you just don't have time for school. It's okay to admit to yourself, this doesn't fit. I have too many other priorities. This doesn't fit on my plate. So, all of this advice is not a personal attack on your schedule. If you don't have time to commit to school, that's okay. You're not a bad person. However, you can't expect to do well in a course if you don't have the time to study for it. So you kind of have to pick a lane. If you're going to be in the class, then you're going to find a way to make room in your schedule for what needs to be done to be successful. Otherwise, you might want to reevaluate when you're taking your courses or how many courses you're taking at one time. Maybe you need to delay taking a course until you can commit the time that is necessary to complete it. So, my challenge for those of you who might feel like you don't have time is to change that. Instead of saying, I don't have time, try saying, it's not a priority right now, and see how that feels. Because at the end of the day, we can make time, but that also means you have to remove something from your plate for some of you. And so that's going to be your own personal decision. But it's not fair to you, to your time, and to your money to enroll yourself in a course that you're not going to spend time studying for. Remember, the typical rule of thumb is about 3 to 4 hours a week per course of study time outside of class. So if you think about our class and how it's set up online, our class time is at a minimum watching the lecture and doing the lecture notes. That's like our class time. On a face-to-face, in a face-to-face course on campus, we'd be in class for 3.5 hours a week. And outside of that time, 3 to 4 hours should be your study time, your lab time, homework time, etc. So if that's not the type of time you have in your schedule, then you can't expect to do well. You can't expect to spend an hour a week on a class and come out with an A. It's not going to work. So when we say that we don't have time to study, maybe we have to re-examine our priorities and see where school fits in. Next thing, and we have touched on this, and this is kind of what Gabe was mentioning earlier at the beginning. I don't need to correct my homework or other assignments after it has been graded. Many students take the Hakuna Matata approach to homework. They put the past behind them. They turn in the homework. They might check their grade on it. They might not. Never go back and look at it. We've already talked about this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but just as a reminder, the future concepts in this course depend on the mastery of the past concepts. As a student, if you're not going back to the previous concepts to understand why you got them wrong, you're not going to understand the future concepts. Engineering is cumulative, so your future learning depends on your past. Great example, in this class right now, in Fundamentals of DC Circuits, we're spending the first about month, 4 to 6 weeks of the course is just teaching you about different tools. Here's a hammer, here's a nail, here's a saw, here's, whatever. We're showing you tools. In the second half of the semester, I'm going to give you a blueprint and tell you to build me a house. If you don't know how to use the saw and you don't know how to use the nail and you don't know how to use the hammer, how are you going to build the house? That's where we're going. And then after this course, you're going to go on to Fundamentals of AC Circuits. And Fundamentals of AC Circuits is going to expect you to have mastered all the tools in this class because now you're going to build a skyscraper. So if you're not focusing on what you're getting wrong now, it's just going to carry forward to more things you don't understand later. So in this class, current divider, voltage divider, KVL and KCL, Ohm's law, and then how to collapse a series parallel circuit with resistors and find the total resistance. Those are the tools. So basically, once we get to midterm one is just a summary of, do you know how to use each tool? After that first midterm, now we're building houses. So keep in mind that you do have to go back. You have to understand every concept because it's just going to carry forward. And then my last common misconception is I can slack off now and make up for it later. This may work in other classes. It doesn't work in an engineering class because engineering is cumulative. So we get what's called the snowball effect. You start slacking off now, you miss a couple of things, but then you continue to slack off until the amount of information you need to know before an exam becomes so large, it's almost impossible to master it for an exam. You can't make up for 4 weeks of checking out in 2 nights of studying. It just doesn't work for this type of material. So be aware that it's a snowball effect. Slacking off now creates a situation where you become so overwhelmed you just can't learn a large amount of material in a short amount of time to be ready for an exam. And that leads to stress, anxiety, cramming, and lower test scores. So ultimately, it's just not worth it. And that's why we talked about procrastination earlier. And this is why I don't give extra credit. A lot of students think I'll just do whatever at the end of the semester or after I get a D, I'll email the professor and I'll just ask for some makeup work and that'll get me up to a C or that'll get me up to passing and I can just skip actually doing the work throughout the semester. There's no amount of extra credit at the end of the semester I can give you to make up for weeks of not studying. That's why I just don't give extra credit. There's no amount that will make up for that. And there's just no way. If you have spent the entire semester not knowing what a voltage divider was, there's no extra credit I can give you right before the final exam to help you out with that. You have to put in the time, you have to put in the work along the way. So when it comes to how you're studying and how you're approaching the material for your engineering courses, again, not just this course, because quite frankly, this is one of the easiest courses you're going to take in your degree. This is fundamentals of DC circuits. It's at the lower level. You're going to continue to go up to higher levels as you get closer to graduation. So these are things I want you to take with you as you go through those more challenging courses. This is the type of attitude that you're going to need in order to be successful. I'll stop there. Any questions, comments, anything resonating with you guys?
Yeah, this is all great information. Just jotting down the notes so that we can keep looking at it as the semester keeps going.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, these are recorded and then you have your reflections. So between your own reflections that you're turning in, and then you can always come back here and look at the slides, or if you want to look up an article later, you can do that. But my hope is that when you're in your senior design course or you're in RF communication or one of your very last courses and you're like, man, I don't know if I'm going to make it, like these things will come back to your memory and you'll push through and you'll get to where you want to go. So anything else? Okay, I think that was it. Yeah, that was it. So that pretty much concludes the seminar. Those were sort of all the things I wanted to share with you guys about sort of what it takes in terms of study habits, mindset, and understanding what you need to do in order to be successful. So if you have questions along the way throughout this course or in another course, you can email me. If you of course, if you're having trouble with the homework or things like that, make sure that you're emailing me or the open lab or starting a study group, and make sure that you're reading the book. Make sure you're watching the lectures perhaps more than once. Make sure you're going back and correcting your homework, going back and understanding why you lost points on a lab. You'll see in Canvas, everything has a rubric and everything has a detailed method for how it's graded. If you lost a point, it should be very easy for you to go back and figure out why. If you're not able to read the rubric or anything like that, you can always email me and I will fill you in. Other than that, don't forget to complete the last quiz and the last reflection for this seminar. And then that's it. We're done with seminars. So the only other meetings we're going to have for the semester are review sessions. And that'll be like a midterm review, final exam review, things like that. So check the class meetings page on Canvas for our next meeting, which will be before the first midterm exam. And other than that, the last thing is the one piece of extra credit that I give and this is like a first because I don't give extra credit, is if you do set up a touch point meeting with me to just talk about your progress in the course, you will get extra credit for setting up that meeting. So if you want to do that, go to my calendar link and you can set that up. Read the syllabus for when that's due. It's due by a certain time if you want to do the meeting. Other than that, that's all I had for today. Does anybody else have anything they want to share? Any questions?
Real quick,
Yeah.
because of a little dilemma earlier, a habit of mine is if I don't have a formula that I took from the lecture notes and put into a certain page, then I will just look it up and put it in there. But I'm now afraid that some of them may not be entirely accurate. So you mentioned that before every quiz or every major test, you will provide some amount of formula sheets. Can I access that now and then put that into my iPad so I can start going over the correct formulas just to make sure I don't have misinformation?
Yes, I can send you a link to the formula sheet that will be available for the exams.
If you could, that would be amazing. So
Yeah, I can
I
send you
appreciate it.
that. The thing that I caution you on is when you go to Google and you type in something like current divider, a lot of stuff will come up and it's all about context.
Mhm.
So you could be what you wrote down earlier, for example, might have been for a specific problem for a specific circuit, and
Mhm.
you were looking for a more generalized formula. So just be careful with Googling, and if you're gonna grab a formula, you have to read the context in which the formula was given.
Mhm.
So I would say that all formulas you should be getting from the textbook. They're all in there. At the end of every chapter, there's a summary of all the formulas that were discussed. And quite frankly, the lecture videos and the lecture notes are coming straight from the textbook.
Mhm.
So you should be using the book for any formulas that were discussed in a lecture. But yes, I will usually I will post a link to the formula sheet about a week before the exam just so you know what's on it. But I if you want to see it now, that's fine. So I can send it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining in. Giovanni, if you can hang back for a second, I have one quick question for you. But other than that, thank you guys for joining and let me know if you need anything.